All right. So I've been playing with this thing for like 2 solid weeks. I think I had it mostly done like last weekend, and then changed direction. It was up to like 58 slides at one point, and I was like, yeah, I can't do that much. It's just too much to do. And it kind of dives into everything, and at some point in time you kind of got to pare it back to the few takeaways that you can get. There, I can give you any other reference materials if you need it, but it goes from 32 degrees to, you know, to all the way through everybody, Ron Kip and just about everybody I know, and a bunch of other medical stuff I found on YouTube and all over the place. So that's kind of where we're going to go with it. So, all right. A lot of biomechanical stuff, a lot of right reasons why and how are going to be talked about today. So cool. All right, let's go ahead and get her started. Bam. All right, fundamentals part 2. Everybody got any questions right off the bat? And if you feel like you need to say something, I highly, highly, highly encourage you to add to the conversation. Okay. There's a lot of stuff here. I still think it's at 37 slides. So, and every one of them is in almost a conversation in and of itself. So I want to kind of keep it moving along, but I also know that there's a lot of stuff here. So, all right.
Just as a reference point, what time are we going to go to? I know you said you had a concert.
I gotta be absolutely positively done at 7:30.
Okay.
That's the lie I told my wife.
Okay.
So what did we talk about last time? We talked about the skis turn around a vertical axis of the body. The one thing I want to iterate there or talk about there is that, yes, that's true, but the vertical axis of the body isn't completely vertical all the time, right? It's always kind of moving. Sometimes it's like this, sometimes it's like this, right? Mm-hmm. So the rotation actually changes in reference to the body. The pointer skis where we want them to go. The whole point of the exercise is to direct the skis in in where they turn, pivot, steer the skis where we want them to go. The rotational movements can originate from different to the body. It's all from last time.
Progress.
Huh? Pardon me? Okay. Upper body is everything from the pelvis up, but lower body is legs down. And we talked a little bit about leg rotation and counter. Deeper concepts that we talked about, we had simplistic rotation and counter rotation in skiing as we know it when we talk about it is basically in that horizontal equatorial transverse orbital plane that separates the upper body from the lower body. All rotation requires an anchor or fulcrum to rotate against. And we talked a little bit about simultaneous leg movements versus sequential leg movements and how those kind of work. I was going to have like a little demonstration thing for everybody, but again, that was the casualty of trying to shorten this thing to a manageable length. The lower body rotates relative to the upper body. That's also vice versa. The upper body can rotate relative to the lower body. Simplistic terms, the pelvis rotates on the femur, or the femur rotates in the pelvis, or a little bit of both. Proper rotation requires it to rotate both legs against the upper body. And so kind of back to that, back to the fundamental, those are the things that we talked about. They're kind of like that level 1, level 2 thing, kind of bridging into the level 3 part of it. Level 2s aren't expected to know. They want to know to recognize sequential versus simultaneous leg movements. I kind of dived into why that and how that happens. But the fundamental is still control the ski rotation, turning, pivoting, steering, leg rotation separate from an upper body. And we kind of added in later on. We got to have something that we can rotate against, and that's that stable upper body. All right. So what else do we see when we talk about rotation? And this is an open discussion part. Okay. So I got some videos we can look at. And these are all like high level things. What else do you got? What do you guys see rotating?
Mostly
And
the
there is
legs.
no wrong answers here. You know what I mean?
Knees.
Yeah. Cool.
Feet.
Feet. Yeah.
And
Head. Look at the eyes.
Cool. Love it. Yeah. Head and arms.
I see the upper body rotating.
Yeah.
Now, I don't mean like, point down the hill, but I think there has to be almost some rotation in the upper body.
Yeah. Cool.
well, is it rotation or counter rotation for the upper body?
It could be, right? Because it goes back to that kind of Newton's third law of for every action, we have to have an equal and opposite reaction. And then, so if we know we have a limitation of where the hips are, kind of talked about this last time, we know there's a limitation of how much the hips can turn. I'm sorry, the femurs can turn inside the hips. At some point in time, the pelvis does have to turn and the body turns with it. This is like an example of some counter rotation, right? Where the body twists and in one direction, the skis twist another. There's a lot of everything going on. So I guess the answer to me is kind of like everything is turning all the time. And that's what I see. And then I see individual parts and pieces turning too.
So I guess it's like adult diapers. It depends.
It depends. It depends because yeah, so like we talked about those 4 ways that we turn: upper body rotation, we have counter rotation, we have leg rotation in a stable pelvis, and then we have the last one, which is outside influence or deflection, some kind of pull plants, things like that. Those are all tactical choices that we make. And we know that they're all going to help you turn. And the whole idea is a turn so that we can go where we want to go, or in a lot of cases like this guy's doing, it's probably pretty steep. He probably wants to slow down a little bit, and straight lighting is not a good idea. Cool. So we're going to really get into the nuances. All right. Uh-oh. There he goes. Bam. So I think you guys have heard me talk about this before. I have the big R, which is the fundamental. When we talk about rotation, we really are talking about legs rotating under a stable upper body. And stable is a relative term, right? Because sometimes the upper body turns more than the lower body, and sometimes the lower body turns more than the upper body. And sometimes they turn in at the same time or complement each other or lots of things, all different tactical choices. I'm also going to talk about like all the little spiral movements that we also do in our bodies that allow us to do some of the things that we do. Because frankly, you may have heard me mention this before. All body movement is a rotational movement of some kind. It involves rotational movement. You have to have it. Get out of the way there. There we go. All right. So bodies move in 3 dimensions. Rotational movement is a movement around a pivot point. And here are some examples of some rotational movements. Some of them are more clockwork-like, some of them are more spirally, and some of them involve circumduction. Circumductions like inventing a cone shape here. Okay. And there's lots of other movements that we do with our bodies. I'm just going to talk about the spiral circumduction movements and the flexion extension, abduction, adduction movements. There's so many other movements too that we can talk about. Again, that's a rabbit hole you can get down into and never come back out. But all of them involve some kind of like a little bit of rotation in some way, because they usually are move around a pivot point. But that's just how kind of our bodies are constructed. Even our flexion and extension movements are a spiral, or not a spiraling, but more of a clockwork style of rotation, because they rotate around an anchor point. Cool. Questions on that? Groovy. All right. If we're going to talk about those, we got to talk about, kind of go back to the stability joints versus mobility joints. This was a huge eureka moment for me when I started thinking about spiraling movements. What's happened like last year, and Jenny brought them up. We have mobility units. We have mobility joints, which are joints like our ankle, where we can move in lots of different directions like this. And then we have stability joints like our elbows and our knees, which even though they kind of spiral in space and can move in different directions because of that spiral, that movement originates in other spots. But the ankle and the elbow and the knee they only got, they're mobility joints. They only really move in one typical direction. They have some other movements that gonna do, but we don't use them that way because it's kind of bad, right? Especially the knee. So we always talk about these kind of like planes of movement, and a mobility joint can move in two or more planes of movement. Not only can they move this way, but they can move this way, and they can move this way out. Like your shoulder is a great example of a mobility joint. It can move in lots of different directions. And stability joints only typically favor one plane of movement. And the plane of movement is relative to where it is in space. And the ankle is a great example of where we kind of combine two or more joints together. And the two or more joints makes it, those two joints allow it to be a mobility joint. And I'm gonna be honest with you, I'm looking at this chart, and the one thing I kind of disagree with, I think it's probably true of the cervical up there, just past the shoulders. But your head, it can move in lots of different directions. I know it's going to say someone here that the head, shoulder, the head and above or the neck are like stability. And that's only because I say so. It says so here, and I grabbed this off of a medical website. But I think the head is an important joint, and we'll talk about that later on.
Yeah, but the head can only, it can rotate sort of in different directions, but it cannot really like flex
Well, it could move
a little bit, but really,
sagittally, and it can move orbitally. But the cervical part of it is the part that supports the head. So the joint we're talking about is literally the top of the stem of our at the top of the cervical, and the head joint there that allows you to do all those things. But that top of the cervical doesn't move very much. But again, like I said, it's the skiing with your head is important, but I'm not going to argue with, medical terminology also. All right. So the ankle joint. The ankle joint is, to me, the most important joint that we own.
Yep.
Anybody guess why?
Guess why?
Yeah, it's the closest joint we have to skis. It's the one that allows us to have immediate effect on the skis, right?
It's the closest to the ski, that's for sure.
Yeah, but it also has that ability to move in a way that it can affect the ski quickly. If we had to move from way up above to get all the way down through the chain, the movement chain to your skis, that takes a long time. So there are two joints that we really talk about: the talocrural joint, which is a true ankle joint, and we have the subtalar joint. And we've all talked about this, so we kind of know. But I got a couple of cool slides here that kind of show you how they work and why they work. So the ankle joint, which is a talocrural joint, is actually like a mortise and tendon joint. And if you look, you can see that it kind of comes up between the tibia, and then the fibia is over here on the side, and it allows that bone to move this way. And we know it does dorsiflexion and plantar flexion. Okay. Then we have our subtalar joint. Subtalar joint's more interesting, which is just, it's all on the talon bone, but it's underneath the talon bone, and it allows the talon bone to move. I'm sorry, it allows I can't remember the name of it now. The calcaneus, which is a heel bone, allows that bone to move freely underneath it. Okay, so it does more, it's like a reverse rainbow shape. Kind of moves a foot this way and it moves a foot this way. Okay, and we could try all these movements if you want. I mean, you can kind of see, you know, if you flex the foot one direction, it goes to the inside and the other goes to the outside, and kind of explore that a little bit. I mean, you have your dorsiflex and your plantar flex, and then you got the two invert and evert motion, which are also like supination and pronation, except they're a little bit different. Now, this is what we're doing when we're kind of lifting our foot up off the ground. We're talking about an open chain movement, where we can kind of physically isolate the movement between the subtalar joint and the true ankle joint. But all that changes as soon as we put weight on it. As soon as we put weight on it, it's a different situation. The foot is a very complex mechanism, and there's a lot of cool stuff that goes on down there. And I highly, highly encourage you to look at some videos online if you want to. Oops, wrong one. Where is this guy? Is really good. You guys see this guy, Sam Webster? He's like on YouTube. He like goes through and describes all the bones and the basic movements and all the muscles that get moved around. He's fun. He's British. He's kind of interesting, and he's got some cool stuff. But he talks about all these joints and how they kind of work around. All right. When we start talking about, you know, blah, 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 what changes when we stand? The foot doesn't move in space, but in a closed chain, because it has weight on it. It's on the ground. As soon as we put the foot down and add tension, the range of motion is much, much different. It's much more constrained. Oh, oops, there we go. All right. So a little bit about supination and pronation. And a lot of people kind of use them interchangeably with evert and invert, and they're not really the same. Evert and invert are actually parts of movement, because the supination and pronation are chains of movement. They have three different things that are happening. So supination, when you pronate the foot actually opens up, all the bones in the foot open up. And that's when you start to plant the foot down on the ground, and you need maximum contact of the foot. And you need to figure out where your foot is in space. And you got to be able to manage with your, you know, with your neuromuscular system, how you're going to place all that weight on the ground. Then we have STG, which is it's just the means that the subtalar joint is in a neutral position. And then when we supinate, that's when we're kind of getting into more of a lift-off situation. Okay. Pronation is great for shock absorption, bad for strength. It's one of the things we do when we're step landing. Supination is great for loading, which is strength, but terrible for shock absorption. We don't really want to be scrunched our toes up when we supinate because it doesn't give us very much elasticity. As a matter of fact, when you supinate your foot, you tend to lock it in place. All the bones are designed to lock in place when you supinate the foot. And I'm going to, if you guys are really interested, I'm going to put this in the chat. This is a really interesting video. Highly, highly recommend that you look at it. All right, everybody see it?
Oh,
Cool.
Not yet.
Well, sing out if you don't get it. I'll go ahead and get it to you later. All
I
right?
don't get it.
Yeah, there's a lot of things going on, but one of the things I wanted to also, I don't want to get really dive deep into the technical aspects, but you'll notice that the block diagrams we have down below, which the blue is the talus bone, the reddish orange is the calcaneus, and of course you have the purple up there which represents the fibula and tibula cavity there that they both work in. And what happens is when you supinate, even the bones within the foot rotate this way in order to help with where the body loads. But I definitely looked through the video. It's very, very interesting, and you'll get a good idea of how all that works. All right. Other related movements of the ankles. When you dorsiflex, you lose some of your evert and invert ability. So when you go ahead and point your toes, you can really evert and invert, but as soon as you dorsiflex, you lose some of that movement. When you dorsiflex, a foot everts, big toe side down. But when you plantar flex, well, I mean, the big toe side goes up actually, but it's gonna, I kind of said it bad. The big toe side goes up and inside, and when you plantar flex, the pinky toe side goes down and in. So those movements are very, very much related. You can't really have, that's why supination and pronation are really more proper terms, because we don't evert and invert very well in our feet. There are multiple movements that are happening within the foot in order for us to get them to move this way. Okay. Supination is much stronger because it locks the bones together. And when the foot is planted, movement is way further restricted. So, and we're going to get into the next subject here. So everybody stand up real quick. Okay. You've had all that range of movement. Now try doing that range of movement just when you're standing. The composite of the foot changes, and it's not just the friction of the ground. Your ability to move your foot, evert and invert, really does turn into more supinate and pronate. And there's a reason why. Bam. So the lower leg and foot are joined in rotational movement. This is actually really cool. I saw this from Tom Gelly, and it was like another one of these crazy, unique eureka moments. It was like, when you're in a closed chain ankle tension, the rotation of the lower leg acts like a torque converter. Okay. So when you rotate your lower leg or turn your knees to one side, notice what happens to your foot. The lower leg rotates outward externally. The ankle supinates or inverts in response. And the opposite is true. It'll evert and pronate. This ratio of movement is almost 1-to-1, which means they're kind of like really locked together. That rotational movement is really locked. in a closed chain situation. As soon as you lift your leg up off the ground, you suddenly have all this movement again. But when you're on the ground and you do a flex movement where you're adding some ankle tension, that is like, when you suddenly realize, oh, this is kind of how ski boots work.
I took a clinic where Jeb Boyd said to a couple people, rotate your leg. They were moving a little too far down the hill. So he wanted to come up the hill. He wanted them to edge a little more. And he said, rotate your legs a little more. And I thought, why the heck is he saying this? Isn't that just going to pull you up into the hill? You're going to just, and then I tried it a couple of times and it was like, ah, now I see what he's saying.
Yeah, this
So
is
what was he
one of those
saying?
where you really want to try this on the hill, don't you?
Yeah.
In summer, but I'm telling you, I do it when I rollerblade, and as soon as I realized what was going on, I was like, oh wow. Now, of course, you don't get an edge response on rollerblades, but when you're rotating your legs, certainly your rollerblades go with you, and the more you twist that lower leg, the more the rollerblade starts going faster in one direction. So, I mean,
So
obviously,
AJ, can you explain what it is? What was your aha moment with rotate the legs?
It was simply as shown by this sort of gearing mechanism, the subtalar joint discussion we had a minute ago, and when I talked about it, as soon as you start turning that lower leg, you find that you can get out, you can get on that edge a lot easier, and you can fine tune that edge movement to
Oh,
get you
okay.
to where you need to be. That's all. That for me, it was like, I don't
So it's
understand. But then,
blending of fundamentals.
kind of, yeah.
yeah,
This is very, very important. We'll talk about this later on. This is very, very important for us later on when we start talking about edging, right? And how edging is affected by rotational movement. Cool. This was, like I said, this was like a big deal to me. I was like, oh, yeah, yeah. And you know it happens because you can feel it even probably right now. I do. I'm like, oh, yeah, I remember when I did that. But I didn't realize that there was such a direct connection. Now, of course, the video goes on. There's like some weird, see that little pin he's got there? That's actually that's the rotational axis. And of course, it's off axis. But yes, the lower leg is definitely connected to the ankles in that respect. Bam. And then we have the knee joint. And we could talk on and on and on about the knee joint. It's a very, very cool joint. It's a very, very uncool joint. The knee favors only one plane of movement, even though there is some limited movement laterally, rotationally. We don't want to use those. That's usually the lateral and the rotational movement is due to looseness, built-in looseness of that knee cavity and the ligaments that help hold it together. There are 4 basic ligaments that hold it together. There's a medial, the lateral ligaments, and then there's a cruciates, and we know all about the cruciates. One holds the knee from going forward, the other one holds the knee from going back, and they go right through the middle of the cavity between the 2 knobby parts of the femur bone on top of the knee bone. And we're all familiar with what happens when you breast one of those. But there is one thing about, like, we look at this video here, or this GIF here, notice that there's like, it's a multi-race radial joint. Whoops. And that's kind of cool because when it's flexed, we have like a short radius, and then when we're standing on it, we have kind of like a flatter surface. So the load-bearing surface of it is the flatter side. And when we stand, the 2 flat parts kind of marry up to each other and they kind of lock in place. And that's when we extend that knee all of a sudden we got femoral roll. We can't really rotate the lower leg like we used to. Okay, the only way we can rotate the leg is kind of in that circumduction direction. This direction is by rotating the whole thing. It's because the knee tends to kind of lock. And the funny thing is we have a bone in there called a popliteus. I'm sorry, the muscle in there. And it kind of goes right in the back of our knee, kind of in that cavity. And that's the part of the bone that unlocks it. And that muscle goes at an angle. So in order to unlock the joint, you actually kind of semi-twist the joint apart so that it unlocks. I just thought that was kind of cool too. More rotational movement. But anything that we do laterally or spirally in the knee joint, it tends to be catastrophic. We don't want to be doing anything there. And then the next slide is, but what about knee angulation? This famous knee angulation. Well, the knee angulation is kind of like a result of femoral and tibial fibular roll. And we got this wonderful ski girl here. Some of you may recognize. I'm just gonna bring her up real quick. Little bit clearer image here. But look what happens with the lower leg and upper leg when she comes around these turns. And how one turns or twists and the other twists and how that affects the skis. But if we look at how the knee works, the knee only works in one plane. So the look of knee angulation is actually an illusion. It's because of femoral and tibiofibular roll that we get that. It's kind of like our elbow here. I want to change the direction of the elbow. I don't break it. I just kind of roll it. And the knee is the exact same way.
This may sound dumb,
Yeah.
but as I'm watching and hearing this and trying to understand it, especially not being that good at physiology in general, I'm trying to figure out, how do I translate this to a normal human being? You know, I mean, I think it's really cool, but I'm thinking,
Hey, what?
how do I, you know, like, how do I put it in English that allows someone to say, I need to do something? I mean,
Well, I think we go with what AJ said. Turn your legs more. But how do we turn them? The whole point of this exercise is not necessarily that we're going to be how do we work with our students? Because we would definitely not talk about all this stuff with our students, because they, you know, their eyes would glaze over and your tip would evaporate literally within seconds.
mhm,
But
sure.
what I'm trying to do is say to you, okay, we're looking at a level 3 understanding of how the parts and pieces work together. You need to know this. Okay. You need to kind of know this so that you can say to them, hey, you know, the turning of the feet is a direct result of our turning our lower legs. Okay. So turn your lower legs, and in turn, feet are going to turn automatically. Cool. Does that help any, Jeff?
I don't know. I got to think about that.
This is, like I said, dude, this is some really deep stuff.
No, and by the way, I think it's good.
Now you
But-
know what I think about in my car on the way to work or that way home all night at night.
Can
Yeah,
we share?
Yeah, go ahead.
One thing I want to that you guys know is that knowing that, you know, kinesiology, how the bone moves is one thing, and then does your bones really move is another thing. That's why I said that I'm just going to put my presentation in one, and then I'm really going to put some preseason exercise as a session. And this is something that's increasing your foot bone slidability is one of the things I've been thinking, because I bet my baby, none of us although I do it, so I probably can slide the most in this group, but most of you guys do not, your foot bones will not gonna move like the one that you saw in the video. And there are things we can start now so that your bones in your feet are not going to be stuck. So at least you have a chance to ski like this. But it's something, Jeff, will be applicable to you. This small 5 minutes teasing out your foot will give you a chance to ski like Ninja or whatever those, Gumby suggesting us to do. Make sense?
I'm going to say yes.
Yeah.
I'm going to say yes. But again, as I look at this, I'm thinking, bend your knees more. Okay. But you have to have almost like a 3-dimensional view. You have to have the real technical knowledge, which is what we're getting here. Then you have to say, well, how do I translate it? And then, okay, bend your knees more. But why? Why? And how to explain why you need to bend your knees more. It's almost like 3 dimensions. I'm thinking, but it's heavy shit. Excuse me.
I'm glad you're thinking that way, because that's exactly what I was going for. You have to think kind of dimensionally. And the other answer for me is you teach what you know. If you don't know it, it's very hard for you to articulate it. So you kind of got to have a firm base knowledge of what you need to be communicating with some folks, and then you can figure out how to communicate it with them.
Well, I'm also thinking about it in my own personal skiing.
Always.
How do I apply my own personal skiing? And I'm not sure yet.
Well, just the best advice I ever got from Jim Shaw is take the parts and pieces that you like, and integrate those into what you know now. And then as you become more experienced and start to learn more, the other holes will start to fill themselves in, and you'll start to understand other parts and pieces. So this might be, like I said, this is a lot of stuff, man. I mean,
I think it's very good, by the way. I mean, even though I'm not like there yet, I think it's fantastic. It's like reading, the ski, what was that book with all the technical stuff in it? It's like, okay, cool.
Edge, ultimate skiing.
Yep.
Ultimate skiing does kind of sometimes read like the instructions to your VCR.
So now I want to be like our colleague, the doctor, and say she probably gets this 100%. Having dealt with it.
All right, cool. Onwards to the hip bone. Hip bone is one of our most mobile joints. And look, if you watch closely to the little video here, you can see all the little movements. There's abduction, and then there's adduction, then there's flexion and extension. Extension only goes back about 10 to 15%. And then you have your, come on now. Then you have that femoral roll. You notice that it rolls inside the hip. There's our hip turns.
Yep.
That's how that bone works. And there are huge muscles all the way around this thing. And if you look, you see the cervical part, not the cervical, but the big part of your side joint, your iliacs, the big iliacs here, the big ear looking things. The reason why there's so much surface area there is because we just have huge, long, very powerful muscles that connect to all of those bones. They'll allow us to have all these different kinds of movements. And we could go into just an absolute deep dive of all the bones and and the muscles and how they work. But this, like I said, I like to keep this to a shorter lecture than, going all day and all night. But there's a lot of cool ones there. The big ones that you need to know, of course, are like your gluteus maximus, which is responsible for, kind of
Mhm.
abduction. I'm sorry, not abduction, but extension and extension and flexion, and then adduction is like the gluteus minimus, and there's a bunch of joints. If you look at a bunch of muscles, if you look at them, they kind of spiral too. They kind of move from the outside in this way. Kind of a reason for that. And we'll get into that a little bit later. All right.
Gumby, what do you mean by the pelvis needs to be secured? That we need to have pressure,
Yeah.
pressure on the other leg while we're moving it? Okay.
Let's get into that.
Yeah, because I was thinking it's like your downhill ski.
For proper leg rotation, like this image, the pelvis needs to be secured. I think what I was referring to here is we're going to get into that more, but notice that the pelvis is not moving in this. It probably could have been down in the comments. Matter of fact, I gotta catch up.
Can I ask a question, Gumby?
Yeah, yeah.
We're talking about rotation. Obviously, rotation is critically important.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to put it in perspective of the other things that are critically important. And this seems, and maybe it's how you're presenting it, this seems to have like a weighting of 5 times more important. And that's maybe a poor choice of words than some of the other thoughts.
I think, and we can get into this discussion later on down the road, because we'll start talking about how they work at the other fundamentals. I think in a lot of cases, rotation gets the short end of the shaft, because people don't understand it. They just think it's leg turning, right? They don't really do kind of how the body moves. As they started analyzing how the body moves, they suddenly realize that, well, wait a minute. Rotation is like kind of foundational. It's very, very hard for us to have any of the other fundamentals without rotation. And a rotation is what I mean mostly by movement. And we'll get into, like I said, we're going to get into that later. We're kind of right in the middle of the biomechanics. So let's kind of keep on going with that. All right. Then we have the lumbar spine, which is another stability joint. It does not like to move very much, which is why we always seem to have a lot of problems with it. It will move laterally, it will spiral, it will articulate forward and backwards, but the amount that it does so is kind of limited, because its main job is not to articulate. Its main job is to support the upper body and connect the upper body to the spine. All right. But does anybody notice anything that's missing here? This is kind of a leading question. I'm not going to ask. I'm not going to.
You're not talking about the sacrum at all.
Well, the sacrum's down there. That's that heart-shaped thing right there. Yeah, I don't want to get into that joint. That's like
It doesn't
that
really
joint
move.
only has about 2% movement anyway, if even that much, and it's really not supposed to move much. But no, I mean, what I meant was there's a kind of a big gap there, isn't there? Between the iliacs of our pelvis and the bottom of our rib cage.
Yeah, it definitely is.
Yeah. What's in that gap?
Soft tissue.
Soft
Wow.
tissue. Yeah.
Actually, it depends on how much in shape you are.
That had to come from Rebecca.
I'm not calling that. There seems to be a gap.
Keep me
Huge
out of
muscle.
it.
I think if we poked your belly too, there'd be a lot of soft tissue there too, Jeff.
No doubt about
Nah,
that.
it's all
Been filled
heart
in with
muscle.
whiskey and cigars.
I was going to say post-COVID, there's a momentum.
So between the rib cage and the pelvis, there is another huge amount of muscles, and these are built in layers. Some of them move this way, some of them move this way, and some of them move this way. And then they move this way. And there's like
Many
4
of-
layers, starting with
Yeah.
the abdominal, which helps us breathe, all the way through the little intercostal muscles that separate between our ribs, which are all vitally important for our support. I guess all of you know that if you torque one of those little breathing muscles there, that everything else is like severely compromised. I know all the time because I can't ever stop lifting weights, and every once in a while I'll tweak one of those muscles and it's like hard to breathe. Hard to stand, hard to do anything.
Oh,
I just know my muscles don't like to move in that area.
Yeah.
They like to grow.
Yeah, so this is what connects our torso together this way. Otherwise, the only thing it would support is really is that lumbar support. It's not really built for anything except for compression. So this part is what allows us to connect our pelvis to our upper body. Okay. So when we talk about the core muscles, this is the core muscles. And sorry for the photo or the GIF. I couldn't find anything else. The rest of the upper body and torso, thoracic spine, which is just like right behind, right behind your shoulder blades there. That is that part of the body articulates a lot. So do the shoulders and arms, allow you to move. They're important for our skiing. I consider those all kind of one big mobility joint. The cervical spine and neck is considered stability joint, but I think the head it's definitely a mobility piece. It helps in the anticipation. Anticipation is a preemptive counter of the torso. Arms help our balance. Very, very important for our balance. Helps stabilize the upper body. Any questions so far?
No, but I now understand what you meant by pelvis needs to be secured, and it's secured by our core. So they're oftentimes they'll say engage your core.
Yeah, this thing here. So when they talk about you got to support your core, you got to keep your core from moving around, you got to keep that pelvis from moving around. Yeah, this is what they're talking about. And they kind of talk about, they're really like 3 parts. We'll get into that later. All right. All right. So there was more, but I deleted all that. And, but I do want to get into torque. And you guys know what torque is?
Mhm.
Torque is a force, created by twisting motions. Okay. And this is like a big Tom Gelly thing too. Talks about using levers and to help you create more torque. And straight joints are very good at creating torque. But if you go ahead and flex your joints, it allows you to create more torque. So we have lots of joint angles and flexion, and it's kind of like it's like a wrench on a nut. If we want to torque our legs, we want to get our legs to torque, we need to kind of get them in a position where we can create some torque. And we create torque by moving the part that we want to push on away from its central axis. And one of the ways we do it, here, stand up, everybody. This is another cool one. I'm gonna step back a little bit. Hopefully you guys can see a little bit better. Get this thing down a little bit. All right. And just kind of bend your knees and just do the twist. Now stand up tall and try doing the twist. Doesn't work. Right? And it's not just because the hip is locked or anything. It's just because it's very difficult to create a lot of torque because the distance that you have to use to make the torque is very close to the central line of the axis of rotation. So, but if you bend your knees, you can actually use your knees to torque the muscles in your pelvis. And the same thing happens with your butt and your hip. Here, you can get it here, but it's kind of limited. But here you can get really powerful movements. And the ankle's the same way. When we flex our ankle with our knee over it, it turns into a very, very powerful torquing mechanism. So in this case, levers, or kind of like the wrench there the guy's pulling, create a very powerful mechanical advantage that we can take advantage of. Pardon the pun. All right, then we go back to core stabilization. Here you go, Jerry. Core stabilization. Proximal stability equals distal mobility. What does that mean? It means we use our stable core, the proximal part of our body. If we use that as a platform, we can allow our prime movers, which are our arms and our legs, to move against it. So if we don't have much core strength, we have limited amount of movement in our prime movers. So like we were doing that little torque exercise, we were bending our knees and torquing our bodies underneath. We had to create a stable body in order to do that. You notice your hips didn't turn very much when you were doing it also. That's creating that kind of upper body, lower body separation that you need when we start talking about counter. Torque and counter require a stabilized core. You have to have a stabilized core. Questions? Moving on. All right, we have two types of counter. You guys may have heard this before. We have rotational counter, which is where one part of the body rotates against the other. Legs go one way, body points the other. Okay. We have lateral and flexural counter, which is where the body flexes and bends in the joints opposite of each other. And this is like leveling of the hips and spines and shoulders in response to forces on the outside or in response to your leg inclination. And this kind of goes back to what Jenny Metz said a long time ago. Rotational separation with that, and you can have rotational separation without angular separation, but you can't have angular separation without rotational separation. So they're not mutually exclusive. You remember that one, Jeff?
Say that again, Chuck.
You could have rotational separation without angular separation, but you can't have angular separation without rotational separation.
Right, okay.
So
And
can-
that's from a functional standpoint, Gordon. I can have angular separation, right? The problem is this is not functional. But I can have angular separation and rotational separation this way. This way. This is angular separation. This is rotational and angular separation.
That makes more sense now.
Yeah. It's a structural problem.
Well, and also just definitionally, you're creating the angular separation with a combination of rotation and flexion at the spine.
Exactly.
Typically.
Exactly. So the
Now,
green line in this diagram shows that's your flexional lateral counter, which is the same thing as angular separation. And then the rotational separation is the two arrows posing each other. Okay. And you can see it quite definitively in this photo. This is a really, really good photo. I ripped this from a 32 degrees, where the body and the pelvis are obviously pointed outside of the blue to the right, the blue gate to the right, but the legs are pointing to the inside or the opposite side. This is a very, very good photo showing that rotational separation and how that works.
Is that not rotational counter, that what that picture is demonstrating, as opposed to lateral or flexional counter?
Well, there is some flexional counter there because look how level her hips are. So there's a little bit of, that's that angular separation part, right? So she's got level hips and she's got level shoulders and she has relatively level arms and head. Okay.
Yep.
But there's a lot of angles that are created. She's fabulously good at this. This is her, in my mind, this is Michaela's special sauce, is her ability to create that massive hip angle. It allows her to maintain really, really disciplined upper body and let the skis just go where they go. That's her magic formula in my mind. She might have a different opinion on that, but she does it better than anybody else in the world, men or women. She's fabulously good at it. Marshall Hersher was very similar, but she's just, I mean, she's almost pointed the other direction with her spine. You know, she's almost countered. But yes, the answer to your question is that is also showing a little counter rotation. And if we flip the image to the other side, you would notice that there's a little counter rotation there. But Newton's law says you have to have some, if you have some rotation one direction, you got to have rotation the other. And she's going at such speeds and forces that it does not surprise me when she has a little bit of counter rotation. Counter rotation is not bad. It's how we handle it. Questions? See, I had some other stuff here.
At what point do you call it counter rotation versus anticipation?
About this much?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
I think if you're doing it as, you know, it's kind of like all the other, you know, this is a tactical choice that she makes. I wouldn't say she's doing this all the time. This photo is just kind of caught it perfectly. This is a moment in time. I think if we watch her skiing, because her legs turn so much, because she's required to, there has to be a little bit of counter built in. And if you watch all the racers, they all have a little bit of counter, especially when they're exploding around a gate. They generate a lot of forces in a very short amount of time. And in order to do that, they have to show a little bit of counter. So don't get too hung up on that. I mean, we're not skiing like she does, right? So we shouldn't have to show all that. And like in counter rotation is a tactical choice. She's about ready to go through a flush here. I'm going to assume that she's using hips more than she's using legs because it's just quicker. Any other questions? Let's see. I had some other stuff here. The basic argument for counter is the legs turn against a stable upper body or torso instead of the pelvis turning against a stabilized upper body, or the upper body turning against a stabilized pelvis. And that's kind of alluding to looking at the body in three parts, where you have this upper body shoulders region, and we have the pelvis region, and we have the lower body, which is the legs and below. And if we don't stabilize the pelvis will turn in response to the upper body, or the upper body will turn in response to the pelvis. So ideally what we want to do is make a connection between the pelvis and the upper body so that they become one unit.
And Chuck, when we talk about pelvis rotation, we really mean that the lumbar's rotating
Yes.
to enable that,
Yes.
which is bad movement. We shouldn't be doing
It's a bad move. if you start rotating your lumbar region, you lose about half of your stability strength.
Okay.
It's actually functionally not good. There's a reason why weightlifters, when they do squats, they do them this way instead of this way. Because this is bad. This
It
is
hurt
good.
themselves, yeah.
That lumbar region, man, you don't want to be messing with it. It's not meant for articulation. Oh, yeah. I had like a standing example too. And you guys may have tried this one before, but stand up real quick and stand on one leg. And this was like a thing we did a while back, and then kind of add a little bit of angle to it this way. Oh, geez. How balanced do you feel that way? Now turn against that leg. Do you feel more stable there? That's a cool way to show your students how you can create counter and why counter is important. All right, let's go to the next slide here. Bam. And then of course we have skiing in and out of counter. And counter is really the legs turning against the upper body, ideally. But does not mean that the upper body cannot turn against a stable lower body. That was kind of what we were doing right there. And that's kind of what he's showing right here is he's got a nice stable lower body there, and he's turning it to create counter against it by rolling the upper body over the hip or over the femur. But when we're skiing, we tend to turn the ski underneath us with the stable upper body, which is more proportionally set down the hill. It allows a body to, or a counter to be created through the skis. And we have a stable upper body. And then like in Michaela's case in the last photo, it may be a little bit of both. There's a crash moment that happens between the upper and lower body, where the upper body twists one way a little bit and the lower body twists the other way. That makes sense to everybody? I'm trying to do a leading story here, and if I'm missing any connections, I need to know. Good old Michael. I love this demonstration he does. He kind of did that last exercise we just did. All right, ineffective counter. Okay, so why do our clients not do this? And we've already kind of alluded, so I'm just kind of going to breeze through it. The upper body is about 55% of our mass, so it's easier to move our upper body than it is to move our lower body. We often lead with the hand when we're walking in everyday tasks, and the body follows. So it's very easy for us to go, oh, there we go. Okay. Lower body tends to be an afterthought when we're walking around. We don't think about how our lower body moves. And because this is an upper skill sport, we tend to go with what's easiest. Again, I found this in a 32 degrees. I included it in here because it really should have been in the last set of slides, but that's all right. All right. All right. Counter. Then we have this little special thing called the wind and the unwind. So as we're creating counter, we're creating a tension, muscular tension is created between our upper and lower bodies around these huge muscles we have around our pelvis and our lower legs and our upper legs. And really, in a lot of ways, our core and our pelvis also absorb some of this torque too, because it's not always easy to always isolate the pelvis. So when we do that, we create this torque effect, or we create some coil is what we like to call it. And then we can use that coil to initiate the next turn soon as we get on edge, we can release that coil and start the steering motion into the next turn. Okay. If we do it when we regulate that uncoil, kind of meter it out as we need, it can be used to help you with that first 10 to 15% of the turn. And it's very, very effective when we're using it in bumps and broken snow, where the skis don't easily turn unless we put them in a position we can. Okay. And we need quick, fast release. Okay. If it's unregulated, the body will just unwind before you even get to the edge and pressure point. Okay. So we can create the coil. This happens when you get to a certain level and you'll start recognizing it. When you get to a certain part in this turn, you create this coil and then you're like, okay, I'm going over the top. And then all of a sudden the skis go whoop like this. And they go straight back down the hill and you're still sliding sideways and oh, there's that ski. And that's that kind of like we're rotating to an edge. That's a perfect example of how we use that coil kind of in an unregulated and unwind. Cool. Questions on this? All right. I got one more exercise for you guys. Okay. The body, we have a center line of the body. And when we move parts of the body away from the center line, we get weaker. Okay. If we move parts of our body, rotate parts of our body to the end line, we get stronger. That's how our bodies are built. Now everybody stand up one more time. Okay. All right, stand on one leg. I'm gonna stand on the other one because this one's already tired. Okay. And I want you to point your toe, I want you to point your knees outwards and then kind of go down into like a semi-squat. Oh, how balanced does that feel? Does it feel particularly strong? Now do the same thing, but this time rotate the knee in. You'll notice that you could go down further and you have more stability. And this kind of rolls in line with what we were doing in that last counter exercise when we had that twisting motion that comes in. And there's a reason why I have this particular video up, because I think Riley is really, really good at this. We've been told many, many times that to initiate turns, we need to turn the inside leg to the outside. Come on. How many of you have heard that? Like a million times. Yeah, you got your inside leg, you need to turn your, you need to turn your inside leg more to the inside of the turn. And that's how you initiate more turning. Right. And I think this may be, I'm not gonna point to this exactly, but this may be one of the reasons why they're starting to kind of shy away from this concept. Whoops. Is because your strength is when you rotate inwards to the center line, not rotating outwards. So if you're turning your inside knee out from the outside line, yes, you do get a reaction with the other knee and it does help you. It's a feeling that you're looking for. It's not what we're looking for functionally. And I've fought this for years and years and years in my own mind, because they're like, you got to initiate your turns with your inside ski. You got to initiate your turns with your inside ski. You got to initiate your turn inside ski. But that's kind of contrarian to what we're doing here. And what Paul Lorenz is like, look at his thigh bones. Are they inwardly pointing or are they outwardly pointing? And we can go back to old Lindsay too. Right? And she's got more of a Q angle. This is how our bodies are built. They're built where the femur bones move inwards. They're not moving outwards. We don't have giant bow legs. We move inwards. The muscles spiral inwards. It's very important for us not throw the baby out with the bathwater. I think it's an important drill that we do. Yes. Occasionally, soften that inside leg, let it roll out. And you'll notice that another knee will go with it, but we're not doing it to compromise our own ability to have strength in the turn. And some people will call that an A-frame. I call that perfect skiing. And he's doing the same thing here. He's got a little bit more of a knee tuck. But I don't think anybody in the world's ignoring or is going to argue with him about what works. All right, cool. Let's get into, good Lord, I got 15 minutes. All right, let's go to, all right, we're going to go into how they affect the other fundamentals. Rotation affects angulation. Rotating the femur and the pelvis allows the hip angulation, and rotating the femurs and tibias allows for knee angulation, and rotating the lower legs allows for ankle angulation. Duh. And counter, rotating the pelvis over the femur gives us counter. Oops. Questions on that?
So you're saying the counter comes from rotating the pelvis on the femurs, because I had always got it in my head that it was up in the thoracic area was the counter.
No, no. We have innervated the pelvis, right? Pelvis doesn't move.
Right.
There we go. Here's counter. That's the pelvis moving over the top of the femur bone. Right here with Michael. You see it, Gordon?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So
Now,
that's upper body movement, right?
yes. This is why the javelin turn is such an important drill. Because it creates counter. But it happens the other way too. The ski can rotate underneath the body. That'll create counter too. And that's assuming you have a stable upper body. Questions? All right, cool. Rotation affects inclination. Okay, I'm sure you guys have done this before. Have you ever taken a weight and swung it on a string before? Right? And when you swing, this is kind of like our turn. And inclination is kind of like the more faster we turn the string, the faster the weight moves and the more inclination it builds, right? I wish I should have done one of these. Oh, I got anything? Oh, I got wires here. So anyway, we rotate the string, and the faster the string goes, the more the weight goes up the string. And the slower we go, the more the weight goes down the string. This is kind of like a demonstration of how that works in skiing. That inclination is a result of turn radius and deflection. Well, there's angular momentum. I don't know if we want to get too much in angular momentum. Again, that was another whole section I kind of went and left out. But angular momentum is basically you're on a string and you're maintaining the same velocity in a turn. And deflection is where we either slow it down, make the radius bigger, or we have a force that pushes it to the inside where it rotates faster. That's called deflection in physical terms. But I thought this would be a real, good idea to show you how rotation affects angulation. We're in a turn, we're rotating around, we incline in response to that rotation. Oh, well, here's some angular rotation here. Just a different way we can see it. Angular momentum, I'm sorry. Technically, he's going straight ahead, isn't he? Rotational influences fore aft pressure. So as you're moving through a turn, we're more forward in the front of the turn. As we rotate to the middle of the turn, we're more in the middle of the ski. Then we rotate through the end of the turn, we're at the end of the ski. Or at the tails of the skis. Our weight moves forward to back. And then as we cross over, our weight moves forward and we catch back up and the skis go back out again. If you guys are interested, Bob Barnes, this is Encyclopedia Bob, did a video on Vimeo called the Infinity Move. And he likens this movement to an infinity symbol. You rotate this way and then come around and rotate this way, come around and rotate this way, come around and rotate this way. And that's, he says it's because the body is moving quickly to the, you know, the skis are trying to catch back up again. And they take a longer path. They take a longer path at the beginning than the core center of mass does. And then they got to catch back up. They got to speed up, catch back up, and they come back in. And then they speed up, catch back up, and come back in. It's an infinity move. Go ahead and take a look at it. It's kind of cool. I thought about this same kind of thing back in the 90s when I was teaching racing. I was like, yeah, you go like this. This is how you ski. All right. Rotating the ski also affects pressure along the length of the ski. I kind of call this rotational pressure. If the ski is on an axis, you know, most of the time we talk about skis like moving this way. But when we put them on axis, they like move this way. And if we rotate the ski that's on axis, on an off axis, we can manipulate how much pressure we have on the tip and tail by twisting the ski. Instead of this way, we steer it this way. We're steering it kind of like this. And if it may not be very much pressure, but you can affect how quickly your radius moves by adding more tip pressure or taking pressure off the tip. Obviously, more tip pressure is going to create more bite, where tail pressure is going to stop the ski from really turning.
I did not know that. That more tail pressure stops the ski from rotating.
Yes.
Makes sense, but I did not know that.
Oh, that was the original fore aft thing. Yeah. Yeah, that's how fore aft affects rotational movements. That's why we have such trouble getting people to turn with anything other than upper body, because when they're on the back of the skis
Can't
not
turn.
designed to turn from back there. Yeah.
Right.
Rotation also influences ski to ski pressure. I think Gordon kind of alluded to this kind of in a backwards way, but counter. Counter allows us to stack on our outside leg against the forces generated in a turn. This is my favorite guy, JF Boulier, because I love him because he's my height. He's not 5'4", making everything look too easy. I'm not even going to talk about that second statement there. All right. Rotation and magnitude of pressure. Well, in addition to flexion, extension, we regulate magnitude with all fundamentals. This is definitely in the level 3 realm, and definitely what Noriko is going to be talking about next week or in 2 weeks. So I'm not going to really steal her thunder there, but we create pressure by rotating an edge ski into the line of velocity, which is like angular momentum, deflection, or hockey stops. You feel the pressure when you put your skis sideways. We want to release the pressure. We align the skis with our velocity, which means we point our skis downhill. Probably the best way to think about it is pizza and French fries, pizza and French fries. We slow down because we're turning our skis inward against a velocity. And French fries go faster because we're aligning our skis. Managing pressure is somewhere in between. That's how we maintain our ski snow interaction. So this guy is a great example of what happens when we don't properly regulate our rotation and our edging. They tend to explode. And I think there was probably a hump there he wasn't anticipating. That's probably what it was. I got him. But yeah, I mean, this is part of that ski snow interaction. Too much, too soon, we go boom. All right. I know this was a lot of stuff and I got a few minutes here. Does anybody have any key takeaways that they want to talk about real quick?
Rotation impacts all other fundamentals.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool.
Well, would you expand that to say all fundamentals are intertwined?
Yes. I would not put rotation above all the other fundamentals the way they have it written. But what I'm saying is there's a lot more to rotation than what they have written. And I think because they purposely did that so that it could be more of a tactical, you can make the tactical choices that you make. It kind of robs us of our understanding of how rotation actually works from a fundamental, from a foundational way. Anything else? And this may take some time for you guys to kind of simmer through.
Hey Chuck, not
We never
today,
got the
but
thing on the chat, by the way.
Pardon me?
You said you were going to send a link on the chat. It never came.
Never came, huh? What the heck? Oh, you know, maybe I gotta hit return. Did that help?
Mhm.
Yeah, that helped a lot.
I'm not real smart.
No, you're just in a hurry. I know. You got
Welcome back
someplace to
Anatomy
be.
and Physiology on Catalyst University. My name is Kevin Tokoff. Please make sure to
There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Chuck, yeah, not today, but in looking at some of Tom Gelly's stuff, I thought in some of his videos, he's implying that some angulation comes actually from abduction or displacement move at the hips. Maybe we could talk about that.
yes. You
At
gotta
some
move
point.
inwards, right?
Yeah,
You have to move inwards. It's better to move inwards than laterally. And you have to do that by spiraling. That goes back to this. This is pure adduction,
mhm,
abduction,
right,
adduction. But adduction is purely a lateral move. It's better to add a rotation to it. You get more stable that way.
okay,
And you look at, he's got a video called the pistol squat video.
okay,
Look at that video. And that was what I was kind of alluding to, where we need to spiral in to create a moments of strength. You know, the only problem I have with Tom Gelly is his legs are entirely too close together. But all these guys are like that, right? That's kind of why I like JF Boulier a little better, because at least he's got a little bit of separation between his legs and you can see some air between them. But a lot of these guys, my God, their skis are like this. It's like, are you sure you're supposed to be doing that? And then you really look at it closely, like, oh yeah, they're farther apart, but they keep them really close together all the way through the turn. So, but definitely look at that one about pistol squats. He's got another really fabulous video called creating rotational separation.
okay.
Uh-oh.
All right. Great presentation, Chuck. Thank you.
No problem. No problem. I hope
think
you guys got something out of this. You know, my goal is to expand my understanding. I'm not completely altruistic. Because I needed this is a really good way for me to kind of put a lot of my thoughts on down. And which were way more than I had anticipated, but I hope that you guys could get some, further and better understanding of how all this kind of works too. Because, that way you can communicate it to your students and become more effective instructors.
Oh, thank you. What's the concert that you're going to?
Huh?
What concert are you going to?
Oh, it's called, it's a blues guy. And he's over here at Knuckleheads, and his name is Curtis Salgado. He's like a old-timey blues guy. A lot of more Delta blues stuff I really, really like. So
Oh, well, enjoy.
yeah. I enjoyed it. So Noriko, I'll see you on Tuesday. 2 weeks, right? Those weeks.
Right, and Gumby, I will send you a PDF that I'm going to, base on my presentation. And if, let people know that they probably want to read ahead before they come to the Zoom. Right.
If you got some materials you want them to look at, go ahead and send them to me and I'll send them
Yeah.
out in mass email.
All
I got
right.
no problem with that. One of the things I did want to talk about before we leave though is what do we want to do this fall? Now, granted, fall to me starts in September, right? So we don't have to do anything immediately. We still got Noriko's presentation. She did say that she was only going to do one. She sent me that email last week. I think that's fine. Pressure management is regulating pressure is definitely a topic that is can be kind of hard to convey sometimes, but and it will only probably take one session to do that. It's really mostly I broke these out into level 1 and level 2 understandings, and the level 2 is we don't talk about magnitude of pressure. We only start talking about it when we get to level 3. So it really is more of a level 3 task, level 3 understanding anyway that we're looking for. So I think that's really good. She also wants to do and then like the 2 weeks after that, do something about, you want to do some exercises that help you with your hip stabilization, knee stabilization, things of that sort. And then I'd also like to do something that sums all this stuff up into like a knee package for Jeff's sake, because he needs like that 1, 2, 3 thing.
You know me too well now. I'm
So
Irish.
I thought I'd pick out the little nuggets from each of the presentation and try to put something together real quick so that everybody can get a little pieces and parts out of it that they need. Okay.
Yeah. Hey, Gumby, I'm seeing this like the first run through, but I think we really will need many runs through on this because it is so vast.
That's why I recorded all this. I mean, I'm waiting until the end to go back through for my own personal look at it again, because I thought they were all very, very good. But I definitely want to, I definitely want to go through this all over and over and over again.